I lay there, breath unsteady, skin still burning. I could still feel him, his hands, his breath, the way he tensed when I touched him. If we hadn't been interrupted, if we had just a little more time, my fingers trailed lower, chasing the ache he left behind. Then the door opened. I froze, and there he was. I needed to get out. The city felt suffocating. The men I dated felt dull, and my body was screaming for something more. The divorce was finalized months ago, but it wasn't freedom. It felt like frustration. Every man I met was a disappointment, either too careful, too predictable, or just too tired to keep up. So when Claire invited me to her lake house for the week, I didn't hesitate. "You need this," she had said. "Fresh air, good wine, no distractions." She was right. I needed an escape. I just didn't realize how much. Come in," Claire said, waving me through the door. The house smelled of familiar wood, fresh linen, and the faint trace of vanilla candles. Warm, comfortable. "Let me grab your bag," Dylan said, already reaching for it before I could protest. He lifted it easily, the strap slinging over his shoulder, muscles flexing without effort, stronger than I remembered. "Didn't realize you'd be here," I said, watching as he carried my things upstairs. He glanced back, a smirk teasing the corner of his mouth. "Didn't realize you cared." I blinked. That tone. I expected polite small talk, maybe a distant hug, something to remind me he was still the boy I used to know. But this wasn't a boy. Dinner was casual. Grilled chicken, corn on the cob, fresh salad from Claire's garden. We sat outside by the lake, the warm breeze making everything feel slow, easy. Dylan stretched back in his chair, his shirt pulling just enough to hint at the body underneath. I caught myself looking, just for a second. I reached for my wine, taking a sip, pretending dunt. "So, what's the plan for the week?" Claire asked, cutting into her chicken. I shrugged, swirling the last bit of wine in my glass. "Nothing, honestly, just needed to clear my head." Dylan smirked, his fingers idly tracing the condensation on his beer bottle. "City life too much for you? More like city men," I muttered before I could stop myself. Claire laughed. "That bad?" I sighed, shaking my head. "Worse." Dylan chuckled low, the sound almost teasing. "Maybe you're looking in the wrong places." My eyes flicked to his. His expression was unreadable, but the way he held my gaze made something tighten in my stomach. I set my glass down. Too much wine, too much heat, too much something. Claire's voice pulled me back. "Well, you'll love it here. Nothing but quiet nights and fresh air." I forced a smile. Exactly what I need. I wasn't lying, but as Dylan leaned back, his gaze still lingering, I realized I might be getting something else too. The wine was warm in my veins, my body loose, my mind drifting into dangerous places. Dylan leaned against the railing, his shirt stretched over broad shoulders, his fingers lazily spinning his beer bottle. Unbothered, confident. I shifted in my seat, pressing my thighs together. God, it had been too long since I felt something raw, something hungry. I smirked, tipping my glass toward Claire. "If he weren't your son, I'd eat him alive." It was a joke, sort of. Claire laughed at first. Then her expression shut down. "Don't even joke about that." I blinked. That was fast. She shook her head, taking a sip. "He's just a kid." The words sent a slow pulse of heat through me. Was he? I glanced back at him. The curve of his jaw, the easy way he moved. Not a boy, not even close. And now, the second time, she told me no. I was already too far gone. The house was quiet, the last of the wine lingering on my tongue, the air thick with something unspoken. Dylan sat close, his knee pressing against mine under the table. A quiet challenge. His voice dipped low, teasing. "She told you to behave." I smirked, dragging my nails lightly along his arm, and his fingers slid beneath the table, trailing up my thigh. Slow. Testing. I let my legs part. A silent answer. The corner of his mouth twitched, satisfied. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "Come with me." I set my glass down and followed. We moved toward the back of the house where the moonlight spilled through the windows, the night air pressing cool against my heated skin. Dylan didn't hesitate. He backed me against the railing, his grip firm, his body solid and unyielding. His hands slid to my waist, pulling me in, tension thrumming between us. He waited just for a second, just long enough to see if I'd pull away. I didn't. His lips brushed my jaw, the breath grazing just enough to make my stomach tighten. I reached down, fingers trailing over his stomach, lower, feeling the hard lines beneath his shirt. A sharp inhale, his hands curled against my hips, his fingers pressing into me, guiding me closer. I felt the heat of him, the way his body tensed under my touch, the quiet, undeniable reaction. A low sound escaped him, his grip tightening. My pulse pounded as I let my hand drift lower, teasing, testing. The door swung open, a gasp sharp, loud, immediate. Dylan stiffened against me, his hands still on my waist, my hands still wrapped around him. Claire, her face paled, her eyes flicking between us, horror settling in her features. "Pack you. Our bags." Her voice was tight, controlled, shaking beneath the restraint. "You're leaving in the morning." Silence. Dylan exhaled hard through his nose, his jaw locked. I held Claire's stare, waiting for fury, for disgust. But I saw something else. Panic, like she had waited too long to stop this, like a part of her knew. It was already too late. The house was silent, but inside me, everything burned. I lay in bed, my skin feverish against the sheets, my breath uneven. The night air drifting through the open window did nothing to cool the heat pulsing inside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, his hands on me, his breath against my skin, the way he stiffened beneath my touch before it was ripped away. I clenched my thighs together, but the ache only grew sharper. I had wanted more, needed more. My fingers trailed down, my stomach dipping lower, teasing, imagining what it would have felt like if we hadn't been interrupted, if Claire hadn't walked in, if we had just one more minute to give in completely. A slow exhale left my lips as I touched myself. Light at first, barely there, but enough to make my body shudder. I pictured Dylan's hands instead, stronger, rougher, the way he would grip my thighs, spread them apart, take what we both wanted. A soft gasp slipped out as I moved faster, chasing the pressure, the need curling low in my stomach. My free hand gripped the sheets, my body arching, my mind lost in the feeling of him. Closer. So close. And then the door opened. Dylan stepped inside without hesitation, his silhouette cutting through the dim glow of moonlight filtering through the window. He was shirtless, his chest rising and falling with slow, measured breaths. But there was nothing calm about the way he looked at me. He didn't ask if I wanted this. He already knew the answer. He was over me in an instant, his weight pressing me into the mattress, his breath hot against my neck. His hands roamed my body, greedy, rough, claiming. I gasped as his mouth found my skin, kissing, biting, setting me on fire. I arched beneath him, fingers clawing at his back, pulling him closer, needing everything at once. His name slipped past my lips, breathless, desperate, and it made something snap inside him. He grabbed my wrists, pinning them above my head, his lips hovering over mine, his breath ragged. "You wanted this," he murmured, "didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I lifted my hips, pressing against him, feeling how much he wanted this too. That was all it took. Dylan groaned, his grip tightening as he shifted lower, his hands parting my thighs with slow, deliberate ease. My breath hitched, my body already trembling as he took his time teasing, testing, making me ache until I couldn't take it anymore. And then, finally, he pushed forward, sinking into me. My head tipped back, a sharp gasp escaping as he filled me, stretched me, set my nerves alight. He moved slow at first, savouring the way I clenched around him, the way my body arched into his, like I had been waiting for this moment forever. Then he lost control, The slow, teasing movements turned into something deeper, harder. His grip on my hips tightened, his breath rough against my neck as he thrust into me again and again and again. The heat spiraled higher, the tension unbearable. I dug my nails into his shoulders, wrapping my legs around his waist, urging him deeper, faster, harder. The air was thick with heat, with the sound of ragged breaths, the soft creak of the bed beneath us, the raw need consuming us. Dylan's fingers tangled in my hair, his lips brushing against my ear as he groaned, his body moving harder, pushing me closer. So close, too close. The pressure inside me coiled, tight, ready to snap. I gasped his name, and that was all it took. The release slammed through me, sharp, overwhelming, unstoppable. My back arched, my body locking around him, pleasure flooding every inch of me in wave after wave, shattering me completely. Dylan wasn't far behind. His movements stuttered, his grip bruising against my hips as he let go. He groaned low and rough as he followed me over the edge. The sun was barely up when I closed the trunk of my car. The lake stretched out behind me, calm and undisturbed, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't spent the night gasping into the sheets, gripping Dylan's shoulders, feeling his body claim mine in a way I'd never forget. Claire hadn't said another word after she caught us. She didn't need to. Her silence at breakfast, the tightness in her jaw, the way she barely looked at me, said enough. I had lost a friend, but as I slid into the driver's seat, my body still aching, my lips still tingling from his, I knew I'd gained something else, a memory, a secret. In the rearview mirror, Dylan leaned against the porch railing, coffee in hand, watching me go. He didn't wave, didn't call out, just stood there, a knowing smirk playing at his lips. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel. This wasn't over. The drive back to the city was a blur. My mind kept replaying the night, the feel of Dylan's skin against mine, the sound of his breath in my ear. Each red light, each passing car, was a distraction from the memory, a memory that was quickly becoming an obsession. I knew I needed to focus on work, on my life, but the image of him, the way he looked at me, lingered, a constant, burning reminder. Back in my apartment, the city noise felt amplified, a stark contrast to the quiet of the lake. I unpacked, the clothes smelling faintly of the lake house, of him. I showered, trying to wash away the night, but the scent of him, the feel of his touch, was ingrained, a part of me now. The next few days were a strange mix of normalcy and longing. Work was demanding, deadlines looming, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Dylan. I found myself checking my phone, hoping for a message, a call, anything. But there was nothing. Just the silence, heavy and expectant. One evening, I found myself staring out the window, the city lights blurring into a hazy glow. I picked up my phone, my finger hovering over his number. I hesitated, then pressed call. It rang, then went to voicemail. I hung up, a wave of disappointment washing over me. The next day, a package arrived. It was a small wooden box, no return address. I opened it, and inside was a single, smooth stone, the kind you find by a lake, and a note. "Remember?" It read, in Dylan's handwriting. My heart pounded. He hadn't forgotten, and neither had I. The stone felt cool against my palm, a tangible reminder of the night we shared. Remember? The word echoed in my mind, a silent promise, a challenge. I knew what he was saying. He wasn't letting me go, and I wasn't letting him. I texted him back, a simple, yes. The response was immediate. When? My fingers flew across the screen. Tonight, my place. The anticipation was a live wire, humming beneath my skin. I spent the day in a daze, work forgotten. My apartment transformed into a stage for our reunion. I lit candles, played soft music, and poured a glass of wine, the same wine we had shared by the lake. The doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent sound that shattered the quiet. My heart pounded as I opened the door. Dylan stood there, his eyes dark and intense, his presence filling the doorway. He didn't speak, just stepped inside, his gaze locking onto mine. He moved towards me, slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. His hands reached for me, his touch sending shivers down my spine. His lips found mine, a hungry, desperate kiss that spoke of unspoken desires and unfulfilled needs. We moved to the bedroom, the air thick with unspoken promises. He undressed me, his eyes never leaving mine, his touch reverent, exploring every inch of my skin. I undressed him, my fingers tracing the lines of his body, the muscles that had haunted my dreams. We fell onto the bed, our bodies entwined, our breaths mingling. The night was a blur of passion, of whispered words and desperate touches. We explored each other, rediscovered the heat that had ignited by the lake, the fire that had burned between us. The next morning, I woke to find him watching me, his eyes filled with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "I shouldn't have left," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "You didn't have a choice," I replied, tracing the lines of his face. "I do now," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "I'm not going anywhere." We spent the next few days in a bubble, our world confined to the walls of my apartment. We ordered takeout, watched movies, and made love until we were both breathless. We talked, sharing secrets and dreams, building a connection that went beyond the physical. But the real world intruded, as it always does. Work called, responsibilities loomed. We couldn't stay hidden forever. One evening, as we sat on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below, I broached the subject. "What about Claire?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated," he admitted. "She's angry, hurt, but she'll come around, eventually. And if she doesn't?" I asked, my voice tight. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a fierce determination. "Then we'll find a way," he said. "We always do." We started to navigate the new reality of our relationship. We met in secret, in hidden corners of the city, in the quiet of my apartment. We stole moments, snatched hours, making the most of the time we had. The tension was always there, a constant hum beneath the surface. The fear of being caught, the guilt of betraying Claire, the longing for a life we couldn't have. One night, as we lay in bed, wrapped in each other's arms, I asked him, "Is it worth it?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with a love that made my breath catch. "Yes," he said, his voice firm. "It's worth everything." And in that moment, I believed him. I believed that our love could overcome any obstacle, that we could find a way to make it work. But some desires come at a cost. Was it worth losing a friend? Or should some lines never be crossed? The question lingered, unanswered, a constant reminder of the delicate balance we were trying to maintain.